So, what are we going to talk about today? Or what I myself am going to talk about today is the second hindrance of the 5 hindrances, and that is hatred, aversion. Usually aversion is the most common translation, but sometimes it's also translated as hatred or anger. What are the 5 different hindrances? So it's kind of the same as in Christianity. They have the sense of 7 deadly sins. In Buddhism, they have 5 hindrances, and the 5 hindrances are topics that will affect one's own meditation practice, but then also like life in general, like from multiple aspects, like on your own well-being. So these are things to be note of, that am I experiencing this hindrance or not, and if I am experiencing this hindrance, then how should I deal with it? So it's not something that like, oh, I like just notice it in general, but it's also something that you should deal about in the first place. I'm gonna talk about all of the hindrances a little bit later on next week, but today I'm gonna talk about the second hindrance, because like we have gone through all of the 5 hindrances, but our second hindrance talk was corrupted, so I'm gonna have this talk again. So for people who have not heard this talk, it's gonna be quite great, because anger is something quite easy to understand. It's not something gonna be something extremely complicated. So I'm gonna start this talk with a story. I love this story so much. So once upon a time there was a village, and within this village there was a man who was really famous, but he wasn't really famous for the fact of the good things that he did. He was mostly famous for the fact that he was constantly being a person to be uncomfortable around, because he was so angry around others. And I get that, like, maybe some of you guys have also like experienced this too, like, being around angry people. They're like always like judging, they're always nitpicking, like this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Like, those are really annoying people to be around. So this was a village where that one person wasn't really known about that aspect of them. Now they were walking back home through the village by themselves, and through a door through a house, they walked next to a house, they heard their own name being told, and then they were like, oh my god, people talking about me. Like, of course they're gonna be like what are they actually talking about me, because like there's something that has to be like actually be told about me. There's something that I need to know. Can I gossip perhaps? Well, they went next to the window to listen what were the people talking inside, and there was a really big fat man in there, and then there was a really skinny man in there. And the fat man told the skinny man that, oh, do you know that person, let's call them Jake for now, do you know Jake? And then the skinny man said like, yeah, I know Jake. And then the fat man said like, well, it's really uncomfortable to be around Jake, because he's so uncomfortably angry at everything around them. They always get frustrated, they always get emotional, and they always boil up from the most simple things in life. And then the skinny man said like, yeah, that's so true. Like, I have this experience and that experience. Like, I have so many experiences that I can just talk about. Like, it's really hard to work with them. Like, they always disagree and they always try to nitpick and so on. It's so uncomfortable. And when Jake heard this through the window, they were like, oh my god, this is so wrong. Like, how could they like talk about me like this? They were boiling with anger. So what they decided to do was that they went to the front door and just knocked it open, and then they went inside and just went to the fat man and the skinny man like and took from their throats and said like, what is wrong with you? Like, I am not angry. Like, I am like so sweet. Like, everyone loves me in this city. Like, you guys are so completely wrong with this. Like, you should not talk about me like that. And then they both, the skinny man and the fat man said at the same time, like, well, how are you treating us right now? And after that, like, they got so embarrassed with their own hatred and they just left from the city itself because they couldn't just take in the hatred itself. So that's really like hatred, that a lot of people who have this really extreme form of aversion, that is like hatred and anger, like they do not realize that they are actually angry, that they start treating the entire world like this. And it's so sad to see that. I met a couple of people in my life too that have been that angry. Is there any people in the audience that love to be around angry people? Around these kind of people? No, I wouldn't like to be around them. But I would say that like, just like the Buddha himself said that anger is a great stain on one's person's personality. So when one is angry, like your entire personality gets tainted. So like you're not really a great person to be around because there's not really a lot of productivity that come from that. Of course, it's an emotion that can be useful in some scenarios, but I would say that there are still like some more productive emotions than in general, and maybe you shouldn't even need the emotion of anger to be productive in some scenarios themselves. But I guess that like, you know, most of us know how it feels to be angry because like I'm also angry at sometimes. Could you guys help me understand what does it feel like to be angry? It's an open floor, so anyone can speak. Any kind of emotions? Like, how does it actually feel like to be angry? Go on, puppy.
Well, you like get like overwhelmed and just like really hot, and you don't know what to do with like extra energy, and it's all like negative and you don't know which direction to like throw it in, so you just like put it in every direction and make everyone feel uncomfortable by like criticizing them and like saying things you don't mean. I think that's how at least I feel it.
Well, I personally don't really know what it feels like in the moment because when you're angry, you're usually not really focused on yourself, but on the thing that you're angry about. So I don't really know what it feels like in the moment. Like when I tried to remember what I felt like when I was angry the last time, it's just completely blank, to be honest. Like
So
I
you
mean,
don't
afterwards, it's
you don't remember
I
anymore.
like afterwards. Of I mean, I do get angry sometimes, but I don't feel like I mean I don't know what it feels like to be angry because I'm focused on the thing that I'm angry about, so that I can't I don't know what I feel when I'm angry, you know. So I think it's hard to analyze what you feel like when you're angry because you don't really analyze yourself or your own emotions while you're being angry.
Well, could you recall how did your body feel like, or how does your body feel like physically when you're angry?
Oh, physically,
Yeah.
like I yeah, like the person next to me
Mm.
says, warm and like high blood pressure. Like I can
Mm.
actually feel my heart like pumping faster. But yeah.
Mm. Is there any other people who want to add some comments about how do they physically and emotionally feel like when they're angry?
To me, it feels like just restless and jittery.
Mm.
Like I can't just stand still.
Mm. So there's like this energy of like that you want to like get out of you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, it is usually like all of these like emotions, but of course together. And I guess that like, you know, that, well, every people like, you know, experiences this. So like whenever you feel angry and sad and so on, just know that like you're not alone, because like this is like common human emotions. So like there's always help for these kind of things. But I too like experience the same thing, that like there's like heat and like wanting to get stuff out. But then also like having the character of unwise attention on the fault that Levko was kind of talking about, that like you get so attached with the fault itself, but in in kind of like an unwise way, where you are not mindful and you are not really aware what is actually happening around you, but you're so focused on the fault itself, and not in a wise way, that not in a really productive wise way. It's more like, you know, just the emotion and getting that out, because like you're so frustrated with it. I will also say that it's quite common for people to feel like this pressure that's coming at you, like from all directions, kind of like getting squeezed, and it's really uncomfortable to be in that physical sensation. Do you guys feel that too when you're angry? Like, you know, this kind of squeezing pressure feeling? Yeah, some couple of nods. Well, those are like quite common to feel like, but so it's like it really, it's kind of like being in a hot sauna, but not in a way that like you actually want to be there. So like in a really hot and pressured cooking boiling pot like environment. So it's really hard to make like actual like, you know, good statements and good decision to in that scenario. So whenever you're angry, just don't do any kind of permanent solutions in that. But why do we actually feel angry? Like why is the emotion of anger within us? Can you help? Can you guys answer that question? Do you have any clue?
I guess in like if you go by evolution, it's like helpful to be angry sometimes if you wanna kill something that is threatening you or your like children or something.
So it's like a self-defense mechanism.
Yes, to defend yourself and the other people in your tribe or whatever they had in the Stone Age.
And I think that's quite true. I'm not, just to clarify, I'm also not a psychologist and I'm not like an expert in this, but I would also perhaps also say that like the emotion of anger is usually always accompanied like around the emotion of trying to protect yourself and from a threat. So when people are actually feeling angry, they are actually just kind of using it as a defense. So when you make someone angry, like I think it's most often for the fact that they're actually trying to defend something, right? That like now they're so angry that the statement that you did, that like they're just trying to defend whatever they actually are. Actually, well, for myself too, like, you know, whenever I have been angry, it has also been a statement on defending myself. But that's why we actually have the emotion of anger itself, like to defend ourselves from the external world itself. Because if you didn't have this, then it would be really hard to live in the wild. But nowadays we live in a great society where there's a lot of like different things that can help us to survive. So we are not really dealing with tigers and elephants and the wild all the time. So anger is not that much more useful because it really hinders your productivity within a community itself to be angry. But anger and hatred, they belong to the emotion of aversion. And aversion is the feeling of not being okay whatever is going on. So those are like the most like extreme forms of that. But there's more subtle versions of that. Like for example, like the most subtle version is actually boredom. Like boredom is like a most subtlest version of aversion, where you are not okay in this scenarios. It's the smallest form of like anger that you might have. And whenever one is like bored, then they like have this force within themselves to do something, because this scenario is like there's nothing like actually interesting going on at the moment. That's why like meditation can be difficult for people, because the emotion of boredom can come across, but then also like the emotions of anger and hatred can also come around. So like the emotions of aversion, that like why am I doing this, and like, you know, this situation is too boring, I want to do something else. But then also like, you know, notes from normal day life can also come across too. Like for example, like the arguments that you have had with your friends and family can also come across too when you're doing a meditation. And then it's also important to know how to deal with them. So whenever you're angry, how do you usually like take care of it? If you don't mind me asking you.
Take a deep breath when you're angry.
That's a quite good advice.
I usually just go back and either my own room or a quiet place. So
So kind of like taking yourself away from the thing that made you angry in the first place.
yeah,
I also would say that that's really great advice, because like most often like people who are angry like 24/7, or they are, that's like a really common practice or like common trait of their own personality, is that they are so blind from the fact that they are like in the state of aversion like so often, that when you take them out of the box where they're actually living, then they start understanding like that like, hey, maybe there is a normal treating house where like it's the actual normal way to treat other people is not to like judge them or hit them or so on. Because some people like actually like, you know, live in like scenarios where the really common emotions to have like is like aversion and so on. This is like something that you can see like, you know, within toxic friends too, that like people who bring this toxicity where they just talk about like things that are wrong, and then they nitpick each other and so on, and it's like this entire like, you know, household or something like that. But if you're put in that kind of place and you're bringing up in that kind of place, then you're trained to do this. But if you take yourself out of that scenario, then that also helps a lot too. So like if whenever you're angry, like, you know, just taking a step back and taking a couple of breaths in and out can anchor yourself in this reality, like what is actually going on, like where are you, what are you doing, what are you thinking about, and so on. Just reading the chat itself. I would say that that in meditation practice, it's usually said that aversion, or like the emotion of negativity of like aversion and being said or focused on the aspects of what is not okay and so on, those cannot exist if there is the emotion of that this situation is actually okay, and this situation is actually something that is dreamed to be and wanted to be. So what I mean by that is that if you have an angry moment, you cannot be happy. But if you have a happy moment, then it's really hard to be angry. Because like I don't remember where I heard it from, but a couple of monks have said that like that the human mind cannot have the emotion of like anger and happiness at the same time. They are so polar opposites on the hedonic spectrum that if you are just in a state of bliss and happiness, it's really hard to be angry. So a really good cure for the emotion of aversion, like even if you're bored, it really helps with boredom too, is to accept the scenario where you are in the first place, and just cultivate the emotion of bliss itself. Bliss is something that is like really hard to describe, because it's something that can be only experienced really, where nothing is actually going on. You're having the most bored situation ever, and then you just have like enjoyment and happy emotions coming out of nowhere, even though nothing is happening around. It's quite nifty. It's almost like you're generating your own happiness without the external world itself. But so like people who are always in the state of bliss and happiness, they have a really hard time being angry. But the issue is that whenever the happiness and the bliss disappears, then it's quite easy to snap back into that anger. I guess that like you guys might have like those kind of friends that they look at you and then they're like, oh, like you're so lovely, you're so sweet, and so on. And then they're like in a driving seat in a car, and then they look forwards at the slow drivers in front of them, and then they start cursing, and then they start being angry at those people in front of them. So they have like this kind of like dual relationship where they like have super much love towards you and happiness towards you, but then like towards some other things that they have like really hardcore anger against. I have a couple of friends like that. They're really funny. But that's what I kind of mean by it, that like that when that the emotion of happiness is quite useful to deal with anger, but it's not really a long-term solution. And I would say that the long-term solutions are to learn to have acceptance. Because like if you are always okay with whatever scenario there is, like emotionally, I do not mean like, you know, like in a greater sense of like the world is going upside down and then you have the feeling of acceptance. It's not that like you're not gonna do anything about it. It's more like the emotional feeling of acceptance. Like I accept that this situation is going on, but I'm still going to do something about it. So if you can just emotionally accept what is going on, life becomes much more easier. Because how do you guys feel when you guys are not angry? When you have guys being angry and then it stops being there?
Relieved.
Oh, that's a quite a good word. I think that's what I will also say myself too. It's kind of like you go on.
I actually feel. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I actually feel a little bit of shame because when I look at the situation from like a little bit of like distance, it just feels so silly that I got angry about like such a small thing, like something so meaningless. So yeah, I guess shame.
At least like the shame can be a really good force to improve your own character, but don't focus too much on the shame itself, because like otherwise you gotta get too negative about it and then it's not gonna be that productive. But at least it's some form of a force. But it's kind of the same, at least for me, that like when you get cured from an illness, because if sickness feels like or like if anger feels like a sickness, then when you get out of it, it kind of feels like getting cured from an illness itself. So it's so relieving. So I would say that like that's the same thing, that when you get done with the emotion of aversion, and then you're like constantly at the state of bliss and acceptance, no matter what the situation is, that's really how it feels like 24/7, like throughout the day to day, that you're cured from some kind of illness that was within you. Because the traditional point of view is that like all of these 5 hindrances, like when one gains enlightenment, awakening, like these just cease to exist. And one part of it is that like a person who is awakened will never experience aversion anymore. And that's how it actually feels like, that there's always this state of like acceptance, and there's never really the feeling of like I'm not okay with this, like emotionally. So there's not like this kind of like friction within the mind, the emotional mind. So they're like in constant emotion of bliss, but it's extremely lovely. But that's also the thing is that whenever you are doing something that you actually want to do, like in a long term, like for example, like going to the gym or studying, if you have the emotions of aversion, like, hey, I'm not okay with this, like, I wish I was like playing video games, or I wish that I was hanging out with my friends instead of studying, or instead of being at the gym. You kind of start cultivating this kind of friction within your mind about it, if you get what I mean. But if you start accepting, like, hey, now I'm at the gym and I'm taking care of myself, it's much easier to go to the gym, and it's much easier to take care of like your workout, because like you're not like emotionally also like grinding yourself, like your emotional batteries too. So that also reminds me of the fact that like when you are, just like I was talking about, like when you are at the state of aversion, if you want to be in a state of mind where the emotion of aversion is impossible, is to be happy and appreciating and being in bliss. When you go, for example, for gym, if the more positive emotions you have from that, the much more harder it is to your mind to cultivate emotions that are within aversion itself. So that's why when you're doing things that you actually want to do, like in a long term, that are actually going to benefit you, it's really important for them to cultivate like happy emotions with that. Like for example, giving yourself a treat, a snack, giving yourself a pat in the head, and embracing the positive emotions. So like for example, like going to the gym, and then after the gym, giving yourself a snack, like some kind of protein powder, protein shake that really tastes really good, for example, or embracing yourself and giving thanks and gratitude towards yourself for making effort to be a better person. And that's also like the same thing in meditation too. Like, that's why it's really important when you're doing meditation, and if you want to do it for a long term, is to cultivate positive emotions with that, because then you will not have the emotions of aversion coming that often, and then it will like snowball into the effect of like doing it again and again and again and again and again. But then it kind of like goes to all things. Like all of you guys have like goals, like personal goals that you want to do: studying, workout, physical body, cosplaying, VRChat, avatar creation, whatever you guys have, like whatever you guys want to achieve in life, it is extremely important to put positive emotions with that too at the same time when you're doing it. So not making it only a dry exercise, but also like saying that like, hey, let me make it more fun, let me get more positive emotions within this activity itself, what I'm doing. because then you're more likely to do it again, and then also you will not have the emotions of, oh, I hate doing this, this is so annoying, and so on. And yeah, but I would like to summarize with the fact that a blissful mind and a happy mind has no room for aversion and anger. So that's kind of like in a short sentence. The time is already running up, and I will say thank you for all people watching on YouTube.